along the Ukrainian front. Tomorrow, Ukraine marks its Independence Day and foreign guests continue arriving in Kyiv. The leaders of the Baltic states have arrived. It remains unclear whether the head of Poland will attend, and several American senators have been confirmed present. Some commentators will no doubt claim that the Russian side could take advantage of the moment, but as far as can be judged, such visits are traditionally coordinated in advance, including with the Russian side, precisely to rule out accidental strikes. On this front, at least, that particular red line has not been crossed in this conflict, and that's arguably for the better. Eliminating heads of state would open the door to an entirely different kind of escalation and seriously complicate relations between countries, since any leader in a state of confrontation would begin to fear far more for their own security. Overnight, strikes hit Odessa. More than 80 Garand-type drones were used, along with Bandier-roll cruise missiles, several other cruise missiles, and roughly 20 glide bombs UMPK. In recent weeks, the Russian side has been carrying out massed strikes on Odessa almost daily, targeting port infrastructure, warehouse facilities, rail hubs, and so on. Separately, Zelensky's statement is worth noting. He proposed handing over the Donbas territories claimed by Russia to a third party as a condition for ending the conflict. The proposal looks openly unworkable and is unlikely to be taken seriously by anyone, especially since by third party Zelensky evidently means the United States or European states. Another piece of news involving Zelensky has emerged. According to him, Trump told him directly that he had tried to deceive him. The story concerned Starlink. Zelensky had asked Musk for permission to activate the system over Russian territory, was refused, but then told Trump that permission had in fact been granted. It appears Zelensky expected to get away with misleading Trump, but it turned out Trump was fully aware of the actual state of affairs. Overall, I think Trump long ago formed a clear picture of who Zelensky is, and deceiving him this way was unlikely to succeed from the start. He's encountered plenty of people like Zelensky in his lifetime. Let's move to the Zaporizhia direction. On the western section, fighting continues around Primorsk and Stepnohirsk. Further east near Pavlivka, intense fighting is also ongoing. Russian units have begun employing long-range FPV drones there, delivered to their targets by carrier drones, motherships at depths of up to 60 kilometers, creating problems in the AFU's rear area. Over Kharkiv, the Russian side dropped leaflets today reading "The end is near," though I suspect the Ukrainian troops defending this sector are already well aware of how things stand. The last update on this settlement came a couple of days ago. Fighting continues inside the town, but whether Russian units have managed to advance remains unclear. I'm waiting on fresh data from the OSINT community. The Russian side has stayed quiet on this for now, and there's no point rushing to claim success without concrete confirmation. That would be premature. Now to the Dnipropetrovsk direction, specifically the border between Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia regions, that same long-suffering line, beyond which, so to speak, there's nowhere left to retreat. This is the area from which triumphant reports of Ukrainian advances previously came, with claims of liberating 26 settlements across a front roughly 150 kilometers wide and 20 to 30 kilometers deep. Later, objective control footage from the Russian side emerged, showing that the overwhelming majority of these settlements, around 20 of the 26, are in fact under the control of the Russian Federation. Activity in this sector has since noticeably quieted down. Going by Ukrainian maps, the line of contact runs roughly along the administrative border between Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions, in places slightly south of it. For now, this direction remains quiet, and we are waiting further objective control footage from the Russian side. On the Dobropilya sector, we're again seeing footage of glide bomb FAB strikes around the town's outskirts. The settlement is subjected daily to massed airstrikes targeting both supply lines and AFU positions inside the town itself. As a reminder, over the past week, Russian forces have advanced significantly to the south, taking one settlement after another. The supply to the town from the south has effectively been cut off. The only remaining functional route was the good road heading north, but that too is now under Russian control. It appears the Ukrainian side is now moving infantry and organizing supply through the western part of town via two smaller roads. I expect that once the clearing of the small settlement of Dnipropetrovsk is complete, the AFU will lose that western supply route as well. Overall, the defense of Dnipropetrovsk can be said to have effectively collapsed, and it's now a matter of weeks before the Russian side gains control of the town. Additional important developments are coming in. Russian units have reportedly expanded their zone of control west of the settlement of Novi Donbas, advancing toward Dnipropetrovsk and Dnipropetrovsk, though there is still no confirming video footage. A similar picture is emerging around Zaporizhia. Reports indicate an expanding zone of control west of Rishine, though some sources suggest this reflects only an expansion of the gray zone, with no confirmed advance in favor of either side. As soon as more information comes in, I'll cover it in detail. As for the advance on Sloviansk, things are progressing fairly actively and, on the whole, favorably for the Russian side. Units have already reached Mykolaiivka directly, with fighting now underway inside the settlement itself, still limited in scale for now, and it's hard to say how firmly Russian forces have managed to establish themselves there. Regarding Encirclement, even though the Ukrainian side officially refuses to acknowledge the settlement as lost, it has in fact been under Russian Federation control for quite some time now, and there's little doubt about that. The advance continues further west of this point. It's worth noting that not all gray zones are the same. In one case, a gray zone forms as a result of AFU counterattacks, in another as a result of Russian offensive operations. In other words, wherever the initiative lies determines the character of the gray zone. Orikhovatka has come under Russian control, as has Persia-Travnev. From there, it's roughly 5 kilometers to the outskirts of Sloviansk, and this direction carries particular importance for Russian command. Russian forces continue striking AFU logistics routes, while inside Sloviansk itself, there is targeted activity against Ukrainian army, personnel and equipment. All of this stands in notable contrast to the narrative promoted in Ukrainian media, which suggests that territory Russia takes over the course of years is supposedly retaken by Ukraine within days, weeks, or even hours. Reality doesn't bear this out. In a relatively short span, the Russian side has taken a number of well-fortified settlements, despite earlier Ukrainian claims that a rapid approach to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk would be unlikely. In Druzhkivka, Russian units advanced to their closest point yet to the city in a matter of just a few weeks, meaning that once weak points in AFU defenses are identified, those sections tend to give way fairly quickly, despite the strategic importance of Druzhkivka and Dnipropetrovsk to the Ukrainian army. In practice, the situation has turned out considerably more favorable for the Russian side than might have been expected. Moving to the Kharkiv direction, today's reports indicate active fighting in the vicinity of the settlements of Ivashchenkov and Onishchin. Based on available information, the AFU may have carried out a counterattack here and pushed Russian units back, though earlier reports also indicated Russian pressure on the settlement of Chon and on Elkovatka, though no confirmed advance has been recorded in these areas so far. A similar picture applies to Bily Kolodias. Available reports indicate this settlement, along with Yorshenkov, remains under AFU control, with Ukrainian side expanding its zone of control toward Vovchansk. Russian units in the Bily Kolodias area have been pushed back somewhat, and the AFU is counterattacking there, though how long reserves will hold out on this section remains to be seen. Overall, here too, the AFU's defensive line has visibly given way within the span of just a couple of weeks, and Ukrainian forces are now attempting to stabilize the situation. Whether they succeed or whether the collapse continues southward will become clear in time. Another topic worth touching on today: Ukraine is running out of money. This was stated by Zelensky himself. Some will say this isn't the first time such claims have been made, and that plenty of things are always running out or freezing up for Ukraine without any visible effect on the front line, and indeed, the current line of contact doesn't appear to be changing in any fundamental way, whatever common sense might suggest. Broadly speaking, Ukraine has a military budget drawn from several sources, primarily European aid, and to a lesser extent its own funds. The European component consists of the well-known 90 billion allocated over 2 years, which goes not only toward military needs but also toward supporting Ukraine's economy, since in practice there's barely a functioning economy left to speak of. Zelensky's government never really counted on tax revenue from citizens in the first place. Not paying taxes has long been something of a national trait, treated almost as the norm. Up to a certain point, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense managed reasonably well in allocating available funds, but then came the large-scale drone campaigns. First, the so-called middle strikes, which enforced an energy blockade of Crimea by targeting fuel trucks, the main component of that effort. Then came deep strikes, long-range attacks on Russian energy infrastructure, hitting not only the handful of major power stations in Crimea, of which there are only around 6, but also infrastructure in smaller cities such as Yalta, Yevpatoria, Saki, Alushta, and others. Also worth mentioning are the strikes on Wildberries facilities. Ukrainian audiences reacted to footage of warehouses containing tens of billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods burning with unconcealed enthusiasm, treating it as yet another major victory. Even so, this did create certain difficulties for the Russian side. That said, the original plan forcing Russia to make concessions within 40 days did not materialize, largely because a campaign of this kind proved extremely costly on a scale that's difficult to overstate. By some estimates from about a month ago, the total value of drones launched came to around $10 billion, with half of that spent in just the past 2 months, that is, over this summer. That amounts to roughly a third of the entire defense budget. A few days ago, a fairly large-scale raid on Moscow was carried out, though it achieved little success. Relatively little footage from the scene has surfaced, and Moscow residents appear to film such incidents without much hesitation, despite official warnings not to, even though the overall results of the raid were well below average, essentially amounting to very little. Meanwhile, by some estimates circulating on the same channels, that particular drone attack alone cost around 10 billion hryvnias, not dollars, hryvnias. In other words, if total annual drone spending amounted to roughly a third of the military budget, around $10 billion, then in a single night alone about 10 billion hryvnias were spent, or roughly 1/40 of that annual figure, based on an exchange rate of around 47 hryvnias to the dollar. It appears the office of the president fully understands the economics involved and recognizes that sustaining this pace will require a substantial increase in European financial support, not the roughly 45 billion per year currently provided, but considerably more. Hence Zelensky's direct appeals: money is needed, and in greater amounts. Only then, in his view, can the situation be turned around. Notably, the Russian side has also become significantly more aggressive in striking Ukrainian retail chains and marketplaces, targets such as Silpo, Rosetka, and Nova Poshta. Strikes of this kind, of course, do nothing to help Ukraine's budget. Against this backdrop, Zelensky's appeals for additional funding are fairly easy to explain. Even understanding that the money will be spent at the same rate as before, Kyiv appears to be counting on the fact that Europe has little alternative but to keep providing it. It remains an open question just how much further Europe is able and willing to spend. European countries already face a growing list of problems: the migrant crisis, drought, and now flooding as well. Some funding will likely be found, some won't. There's a sense that a peak has already been reached, or is about to be, the point at which Ukraine was able to launch these drones in virtually unlimited numbers. That's all for today. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you next time.